So as someone who's been a longtime Pokemon fan, I've played just about every generation of the main series, with the exception of Gen 9. From each generation, I played at least one of the main games. Whether that be through an emulator or the original console release, I have some experience playing with each of them. I've even played all of the remakes, with the exception of one, and it's probably the most critically acclaimed and most beloved of all the remakes, this being Pokémon HeartGold and SoulSilver. Now this may come as a surprise to some of y'all since I made a couple videos talking about Gen 5, and I mentioned how I thought the DS era was the peak of the franchise, but I've never played HeartGold or SoulSilver in full. I played like a little bit of SoulSilver a long time ago, but I didn't make any real progress. I made more progress in Brilliant Diamond than I did in either of those games, and I didn't finish that one either. Hell, I played through both the original Gold and Silver and even a little bit of Crystal before I even scratched the surface of what these remakes had to offer. But all of this changed over the summer. You see, I went ahead and made the decision to play through and complete one of these games. The version I went with was SoulSilver, since it was the one that I had played a small bit of years ago, and also because Lugia is one of my favorite legendaries. I was already aware of how loved these games were, and a lot of its features that people liked, like the partner Pokemon mechanic, the music, a lot of its improvements over the first games, and a bunch more. But I myself wanted to get the full effect, and not only to hopefully fall in love with these games, but to see if these games still hold up in 2025. And now after playing, can I say it delivered? Spoiler alert, the short answer is yes, but it's a little more complicated than that, and there are a bunch of reasons as to why that is my answer. Since we're talking about remakes here, I feel like it's kind of necessary to bring up and compare the original games. Like I said earlier, I've played both the original Gold and Silver. So throughout my time playing SoulSilver, I was able to spot a lot of the differences within the game. Obviously, due to the consoles they came out on, the originals were pretty limited when it came to content. That being said though, they were still pretty huge games for their time. And there was a lot of stuff you can do within them, as well as a bunch of new additions that would become mainstays of the franchise. Like the day and night cycle, dark and steel types being introduced, the female MC option which will be added to Crystal, and so much more. I also can't leave out the fact that these were the first Pokemon games with shinies. I'll never forget playing the original Gold and Silver and encountering my first shiny Pokemon, being a shiny Rattata, which may not sound like anything too crazy on paper, but as a kid who had never found a shiny Pokemon before, this was truly an unreal moment. Immediately I brought its HP down and went into my bag, only to see that I had absolutely no Pokeballs in there. All I could do was just sit there and look at it through the screen before eventually running away, just being absolutely devastated. This was like over a decade ago, but wherever it's at now, I hope it knows that it hasn't been forgotten. Anyways though, with the childhood vent session out the way, the remakes for these games take things to a whole nother level. Whether it be small stuff like extra side content with NPCs, or bigger things like expanding the post game, SoulSilver had a lot going on. There were even a few new things added to the story, but like my black and white videos, I'll touch on that later, along with the gameplay and my experience overall. For now, I want to shift focus onto the graphics. This was Game Freak's first time really blending in the 2D and 3D elements into one game. They experimented a little bit with this in Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, but HeartGold and SoulSilver was their first time fully doing games in this style, and I must say they did a very solid job. I may sound a little biased since the DS era is my favorite era of the games, but this hybrid of the 2D and 3D graphics has got to be my favorite visual style. There's just a certain charm about it that I have an attachment to. It feels like the perfect bridge between the older gens and the ones that would come after. And within HeartGold and SoulSilver, the graphics help add a lot more to the atmosphere in some of the locations, and looks really good in the game's cutscenes. Now before I head on to the actual story and gameplay, there's one more thing that I want to talk about. Y'all already know I can't do a Pokemon video without talking about the music. Since these games are remakes, most of the OST is pretty much just newer versions of the tracks from the old games, but of course there's some new ones as well, like the new Battle Frontier OSTs in the post game, or the global terminal theme in Goldenrod, which in my opinion is a hidden gem of a track that doesn't get enough attention. When the track started playing, I was genuinely amazed that I hadn't heard it before. The track sounds like you're just ascending to another level, while also sounding oddly similar to Colress's theme from Black and White 2, which would come out a couple years after. Not sure if there was some inspiration there, but nonetheless, both tracks are fire. Anyways, as for the remade tracks, you've got a pretty interesting case. For me personally, I prefer most of the tracks from these remakes over the ones from the originals. The new champion and gym leader themes go absolutely hard, and the new national park theme has this absolutely beautiful sounding piano playing throughout it. I already like the track from the original games, but this version has a certain nostalgic and tranquil sound to it that I just can't help but fall in love with. That being said though, there are also some from the OGs that I like more than the new ones, like the Goldenrod theme for example, or the Ice Path OST, which I think captures the vibe of this location better. Overall though, this game has some phenomenal music, and yet again shows just how good the music from this franchise is. Alright, now we finally move on to the gameplay and the story. Like I said, Gold and Silver were pretty big games for their time, introducing a bunch of new things, a lot of which will become mainstays of the series. And going into HeartGold and SoulSilver, I was hoping that they would stay fairly true to the original games. In a nutshell, they basically take elements from the story of the original games and combine them here. Team Rocket's still the main villain, Silver's still your rival, though they've added a lot more to his character, greatly improving him overall. They've even brought in Yusin from Pokémon Crystal. But like most remakes, they added some new things to the story, as well as some new locations. A new thing that's been added is the Professor's Assistant. This could be either Ethan or Lyra depending on which gender you pick. It's similar to how Dawn and Lucas were in the Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum games. And of course you've got new locations like the aforementioned Battle Frontier, or the Pokeathlon Dome, where you can have your Pokemon compete in different games. Oh, and I can't forget about the new Safari Zone in Johto, which was actually closed in the OG games. This Safari Zone has a bunch of different biomes in it. I spent some time there while playing and it was pretty cool, though I do wish there was more variety with some of the Pokemon you could catch. Speaking of which, my playthrough overall went pretty smoothly, I'd say. I chose Totodile as my starter since he's my favorite out of the main three, and the gyms overall weren't too difficult. Except for Whitney, I'm sorry. It seems no matter what variant of her I'm fighting, she always ends up being a problem. For my battle against her, she just kept spamming Milk Drink over and over again, and I swear that shit had infinite power points. I damn near punched the wall during her fight because I think I was genuinely losing my mind. That aside though, the Elite Four was a bit of a rocky road, but I would eventually become champion, winning against Lance, who still has 3 Dragonites. I'm sure this is a common take, but they could have at least changed one of those to a Tyranitar. Maybe showing my bias against his Tyranitar is one of my favorite Pokemon, but seriously, it would have made his team a lot more interesting while fighting. After this, you got the post game, and like the other DS era entries, it's a very vast one. There's the Battle Frontier, which actually replaced the Battle Tower from Crystal, and again, it's the same exact one from Platinum, as well as having the same Frontier Brains, who I think have some really cool designs. I've always liked the idea of the Battle Frontier. I think it's the best out of all the big battle facilities from the mainline games, behind the Pokemon World Tournament from Gen 5 of course. The Battle Tree from Sun and Moon does come very close, but I'm gonna give the Battle Frontier the slight edge. I think we can all agree though that they're both better than whatever the hell the Battle Chateau from Kalos was. Aside from the Battle Frontier, however, you have the Kanto portion. This was already a pretty cool addition in the old games, but it is so much better in the remakes. And the graphics continue to shine here with some of the cities and towns. Plus, to make things even better, you can catch Mewtwo here, which you couldn't do before. Speaking of which, you can catch a bunch of legendary Pokemon in the post game. I managed to catch Latios, the legendary birds, Ho-Oh, and Suicune. I still have yet to go back and catch the other 2 legendary beasts. And of course, last but not least, I went ahead and did the red fight. I mentally prepared myself because I remember just how difficult he was in the original games, and his Pokemon were even higher leveled in these games than they were back then, so I knew this was not gonna be an easy match. I made it to the top of the mountain and I immediately felt this man's aura. The levels were off the charts. It would take me 2 attempts to beat him, though I would get him down to his last 2 Pokemon on my first try. My second attempt was just barely successful, and just like he did in the OGs, he disappears after the fight. And once this battle ended, I went ahead and concluded my playthrough, feeling very satisfied with everything that I had consumed from this game. There was still a few more things I could do, but I had basically done all the major stuff. Now I know I already gave my answer as to whether or not I think this game delivered, but after looking back at SoulSilver as a whole, I think I can comfortably say that these are the best Pokemon remakes. As much as I do love Alpha Sapphire and Omega Ruby, I think that these games take the cake. They sort of hit a soft spot while I was playing. Even as far back as the early portions of this game, I felt a wave of nostalgia. Again, this is my first real time doing a playthrough of this game, so I've hardly had any experience with it, but something about it just hit me, and I think I know why that is. Like I said earlier, it had been over 10 years since I played Gold and Silver, meaning that SoulSilver was my first Johto game since then, and hearing the music and being in some locations that I was already familiar with in the original games, accompanied with the DS graphics, which I already had a strong feeling of nostalgia towards, it made it feel like a truly special experience. I not only think that these remakes go on to re-establish just how great the Johto games are, but also allow me to regain my love for them, and serve as a reminder, for me at least, how Gen 2 was the start of the golden age of the franchise. With all that being said though, we've reached the end of the video. If you made it this far, hope you enjoyed. If you haven't already, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.